A family of three piled out of a rusty moving van. "Just a quick look before we leave," the mother exclaimed. Her husband and son groaned in unison. With a glare, she said, "Harvey, can you set a positive example for Jason, please?" Harvey shrugged.
Sorry, Grace. I'm just exhausted.
He then put his hand on his son's shoulder.
Buddy, your mom just wants to see if there's anything we need for our new house. You know we had to sell a lot of our stuff to afford to move.
Jason shrugged and said,
Okay. Sorry, Mom.
Grace kneeled to his eye level and said, "It's okay, sweetie. I know you're tired too." She looked over his shoulder and gave a gentle smile. "Hey, it looks like there is another kid here. Why don't you go introduce yourself?" Jason looked behind him and noticed a boy about his age sitting by himself in the grass. He smiled and agreed with his mom. Grace and Harvey started walking over to the yard sale in front of a quaint green house. The pastel yellow shutters matched the front door. Harvey pointed out that the colors and layout were similar to their old house, to which Grace smiled and agreed. There were 6 fold-out tables in the front yard with clothing, kitchen tools, decorations, and random office supplies. They were all spread out neatly and organized, with the stickered prices underneath. Grace reached for her husband's hand and Squo's. "I'm glad we have some extra cash to spend on the small things we need to replace." Harvey smiled and Squo's back.
I'm happy that you're happy, babe.
Grace approached the woman behind the line of tables and said, "Wow, you have so many things to choose from." The woman smiled. "Yeah, we are moving in a few days. My husband and son aren't too thrilled that we have to sell a lot of our stuff." "I know all about that. We are moving as well." She gestured behind her. "We just needed to replace a few things that we had to sell to afford that beast." "Oh," the woman exclaimed. "Same here. Moving vans sure are pricey." "I know, and so not worth it. I'm afraid it's going to fall apart if we close the doors too hard," Grace said with a nervous laugh. "Oh dear. Well, we have even more stuff to sell in the garage that you're more than welcome to. I just didn't get around to pricing them, but I'm happy to barter. We might have some packing tape to help hold your van together." They shared a laugh as Harvey waltzed over to the garage. Grace reached out her hand towards her newfound acquaintance. "My name is Grace Shepard. Shelby Gates." She gently shook her hand. "It's nice to meet you." "Likewise." Grace smiled warmly. "Well, I'll go join my husband in the garage, and I'll let you know if we find something. I'll certainly take you up on that tape." As Grace made her way to the garage, she saw Jason running and playing with the kid they saw earlier. "That must be Shelby's little boy," she thought. Harvey was standing in the garage, looking like he was in a trance. "Hey, babe." Grace put her hand on his shoulder. "Find anything good?" Harvey shuddered and turned to his wife.
Gracie, does this look familiar to you?
He pointed at a white ceramic urn with pink and yellow flowers painted on it. She gasped and exclaimed, "What the?"
Isn't that your mom's urn?
he asked timidly.
Like, didn't your dad paint it just like that?
Grace nodded absently and reached for the urn to further examine it. In disbelief, she saw the words, "Fly High, Rebecca Bird." Gliding above the words was an intricately painted bluebird. She wiped tears away and said, "I'll go see if maybe Jason got it from the front seat. Maybe he just wanted to show it to his new friend." Harvey shook his head.
I can go take care of that. Why don't you sit down for a second? You look really flush.
Grace nodded and waited for Harvey to return. "It can't be," she thought as she held the urn, scanning over each detail. "It's identical." Harvey slowly walked back, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. Grace noticed he was holding her mother's urn.
Jason never touched it.
He said in disbelief.
It was still in the front seat.
Grace stood and quickly took the urn over to Shelby. This sounds so crazy, but this was in your garage and..." "What?" Shelby gasped and reached out to grab the urn. David, come here, please. I can't imagine how that ended up in there. We're definitely not selling that. I'm terribly sorry, but those are my mother's ashes. Shelby's husband, David, came over and asked what was wrong. Why was this in the garage and not on the mantel where it belongs? Now I have to tell this nice lady that we're not selling it. David shrugged.
I definitely didn't put it in there. I'll go talk to Ryan.
Grace raised her eyebrows and interrupted. No, I don't want to buy it. It's just that... She gestured over to Harvey as he walked over with the identical urn. I have no idea how to explain all of this, but... Grace gently took it and showed Shelby. My mother, Rebecca Bird, died 2 years ago, and my father hand-painted everything on her urn. It looks just like... Tears began to run down Shelby's cheeks, and she said, Why, that's exactly the same... They both gasped as the urns began to quiver and shake, so much so that they fell from their hands and shattered into the blades of grass. In shock, Grace reached down to try to gather the ashes up in her hands, but before she could, all of the ashes rolled together. They started to slowly float above everyone's head. Each particle weaved around each other until it formed a giant blue bird. Time and everyone at the yard sale stood still as the bird flapped its wings, tousling everyone's hair. Grace, Shelby, and their husbands were in awe as tears welled up in their eyes. Suddenly, its wings singed at the tips, and flames began to spread across the bird's body, all the way to its head. It screeched so loud that it echoed all through the air. They tried to run, but their legs felt stiff as boards. The flames burned brightly until there was ash again. Then it became the starkest raven anyone had ever seen. It cawed and flapped one of its wings towards Harvey and David, making them disappear into thin air. Grace and Shelby screamed, No! Then the raven looked to Grace and Shelby, who were clutching at each other. They stared back up at it in tears of grief and fear. The raven began to speak.
Hello, my daughters. We are together at last.
It swooped down and grabbed them in its wings and soared up through the now stormy sky, leaving stupefied people in its wake. Grace and Shelby were now in the clutches of the raven's talons. Past the thunder, they could hear their little boys calling out for them. Heavy, frightful tears fell down their cheeks as they begged the raven to put them down. The bird cawed.
Not after all this time of trying to find you. It's been so cold and lonely without my darling girls. You know you were never meant to stay. Please don't make me be alone again. I never wanted to die. Not without you.
The sky began to close around them, holding them in a tight embrace. Finally, Grace and Shelby had no choice but to succumb to their fate. They felt a familiar warmth in the breeze with every flutter of the raven's wings. The raven clutched them tightly in its talons, then flung them high above the clouds and into the galaxy. Grace and Shelby felt no fear as they merged together to form a bright star. Their mother's lullaby roamed through their first and final memories.
Hush now, my trembling tyke, I bring you this very sky, to live and laugh here with me, to gaze down upon the trees, with a flick of my wings, and this pleasant song to sing. You now know what you are. Shine now, my shimmering star.